Hello everyone, it's Andy here from the Movement Project. Today I'm going to be discussing, is your gut bacteria causing your depression? So welcome back everybody. Just one thing I wanted to say, if you're new to the channel, please remember to subscribe, click that bell icon just so you get a reminder of any new videos that I upload. So in this video I'm going to be discussing three aspects of gut microbiome. So this is going to be, what is your gut microbiome and why is it important? Is there a link between gut bacteria and depression? And how do we improve our gut bacteria? You can click on the timestamps in the description box below if you want to skip to any of these sections. So what is our gut microbiome? Or most people refer to this as their gut bacteria. Now, you probably heard a lot in the news, there's a lot about good and bad bacteria, and this seems to be true. So the gut microbiome is what most people mean when they're referring to as their gut bacteria. The gut microbiome is defined by the famous molecular biologist Joshua Liedenberg, is a totality of microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, fungi, and the collective genetic material present in the gastrointestinal tract. I decided to do this video because there is a huge amount of research recently been published on gut bacteria and its effects on the body. In 2018, there were 1,300 studies that were published on this subject. So as I've read more into this subject, I really found it fascinating that what we think of our mind state or how we function as this sort of unaltering, unaffected higher consciousness seems to be not true when we start to look at a lot of things that can affect it without our knowledge. So the gut bacteria seem to form a symbiotic relationship between themselves and us, and we seem to, how our state of mind seems to affect them and vice versa. So the gut bacteria, if under stress or if there is an imbalance in certain gut bacteria, that seems to then or can have an effect on our mental state. I thought I'd use a few examples in nature that I found when researching this subject, and I also found it just really interesting. So there's certain fungi that can affect ants, that once the spores have gone into the ant, they migrate into their brain, and what they get them to do, they get them to go to the highest point, so maybe on a stem of a leaf or onto a tree, and then they bite down with their jaws onto that stem, and then the fungi starts to grow out the top of the head, which then over time releases spores, which then affects other ants. So these ants have been completely almost like zombified by this fungi, and then can affect them to do their actions that is proved or is beneficial for the fungus. So also I found another example of this in rats. So there is a certain parasite that affects the rat's brain, which makes or lessens its fear of cat urine, which sounds obvious. So the cat urine would be, if the rat was to smell that, would be straight away in fear and they would run away. So this parasite suppresses that fear. So it also suppresses their fear of the cat and actually makes them attracted to the cat. So as you can imagine what happens, the rat runs towards the cat eats it, and why the parasite does this, that is trying to get into the cat's stomach where it reproduces. So after the parasite has reproduced, so the cat feces will be infected with this parasite. So this then affects or contaminates the water, which then the rat may drink from, which then the parasite goes back into the rat and then affects the brain, and then the cycle continues. The reason why I use these two examples, which I know is a bit of far-fetched when you think of us, but it just shows the power of what certain other, whether it's fungi, parasites or bacteria, can have an effect on our mental state or mental well-being. So I spent hours and hours researching this subject, and I feel like I've only just got to the tip of the iceberg when I'm finding information about this. But what I've summed up, and I have listed various studies that look specifically at the gut bacteria with a link with depression in an article I wrote, so I'll put this in the description box below. But what I've summed up is human and animal studies provide evidence for implying a strong link between the gut microbiome composition and the development of mental disorders such as depression and anxiety. So this is a strong link. It is not yet proven, but it seems to be very likely. So certain studies I looked at almost describe the brain and the gut as some sort of axis that has a direct correlation or effect on each other. So there was a neurotransmitter called GABA, This is involved in suppressing or calming down our brain, so certain the nerve impulses. So if we feel quite heightened, quite anxious and stressed, this would suppress that feeling. But there was a gut bacteria that actually in the gut that gobbles up this GABA, so it eats it as an energy source. So then you don't have as much GABA that could go to the brain and have that calming effect. So most of us think about stressors as this external factor, whereas it could be that this gut bacteria is out of balance in your stomach that eats that GABA neurotransmitter, which then our brain doesn't get enough of, then causes us to be anxious, even depressed. So there may be another mechanism of how certain gut bacteria can cause depression. So a certain gut bacteria that has been linked to inflammation, and it's been fairly well established in research that inflammation can cause depression. There may be a link between these two, so it's actually the gut bacteria that's leading to inflammation, which is then giving you the depression. There is also certain bacteria that's been linked that if it shows higher amounts in the gut, in your gut microbiome, that actually it has anti-inflammatory effects. So this is really important when we start to think about, if we're depressed, we normally look for external factors, where actually it might be important for us to try to take care of microbiome. So I hope you found those two just basic examples useful. It's just to illustrate the point that certain gut bacteria can have an effect on our depressive state, also anxiety. So the question comes, how do we improve our gut microbiome? I read a great article that looked at how our modern lives can be affecting our gut microbiome in a negative way. So this discussed things like sanitation, modern medicine, infant formula. They all seem to be playing a role and negatively affecting our gut microbiome. So we can try to take these things into account and try to obviously remove these. So not over sanitizing, trying to use more natural products in the house to clean, not bleaching as much, those sort of things, which then potentially can have a better effect on our gut microbiome. So there's a lot of research going on at the moment that are using fecal transplants. So this is exactly how it sounds, doesn't sound too nice. This is where they transport people or someone who has a healthy gut microbiome and transplants their feces into someone with an unhealthy gut microbiome. So this is still in fairly early research, but it is really coming along now. This is not something that you want to do at home. I've definitely read some articles that people have tried this. It's just something we have to unfortunately wait for and just let the scientists perfect this procedure, and then hopefully in the future this will be a standard procedure for treatment for people with unhealthy gut microbiomes. So I will discuss a few tips now on things that you can potentially do at home to try to improve your gut microbiome. So the first one is eating certain carbohydrates like legumes and things, whole grains, so these are oats and barley, to try to improve your good bacteria. So these bacteria like these carbohydrates and feed off them. So these are really good. So this is very easy to implement. The next one is eating fermented foods. So these are things like kimchi, miso, sauerkraut. You can also try a product called kombucha. So this is effectively a fermented tea. There are loads of different flavors out there. There's ones from Marks & Spencer's that I normally buy. I'll put a link in description box if you want to try these. You can get these on Amazon, and they're really, really tasty. They are carbohydrated, so maybe they're not the healthiest, but they do have fairly low sugar content, and I think they taste great. So maybe something that you can buy instead of that fizzy Diet Coke or whatever else you might enjoy. This is, I think, a fairly good alternative. Another thing is eating less processed food. This sounds really obvious when we think about it. Eating processed food is not really good for much, so just try to eliminate this out of your diet as much as you can. So the next one is golden kiwi fruit. So this one wasn't so obvious, but I read some studies that seems to help a certain gut bacteria. Now this gut bacteria is been associated with decreased levels of or incidences of depression. So I thought that there potentially is a good reason to why you wanted to take this. Now the supplement seemed to be more available in places like America. So I'll let you do your own research on that one. There wasn't any particular products I felt like I could really recommend, but it's called golden kiwi fruit. So that's another possible thing that you could try to supplement with and see if that could improve your gut bacteria. So the next one is eating more vegetables and fruits. So these things, especially things like asparagus, bananas, garlic, drew some artichoke and onions. So really simple things to implement in your diet, and these have been shown to increase good gut bacteria. Also, last thing that you could do is try to reduce stress. So I know if we all could we'll click our fingers and we'd feel less stress. So I know it's not always easy for everyone, but you've got to really try to think of that if something is causing you stress, that it is in your interest for your gut bacteria to remove this from your life, because even if you have a healthy diet and you're getting a lot of these things in your diet that help with your gut bacteria, it may not be enough, and actually the stress is causing that imbalance, which is then making you more stressed. So you've got to think, I've got to take care of myself and I've got to remove that stressor. This can even be something like a lack of sleep. So I did an article on this, on ways to improve improve your sleep hygiene. So I'll put a link here or in the description box below where you can read further that article. So I hope you found some of those tips useful. Remember to write some of those down just so you're more likely to implement those. Also remember to subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you get reminded of new videos when I do upload them. Thanks very much for watching.